Shri Anil Swaroopji, Miss Judith Weinberger Singh, my friend Professor Rekha Saxena, and all the esteemed guests who are present online and who are sitting in this August gathering, a very good afternoon to you. It gives me a lot of pleasure to welcome you all to today's session of this Federalism Hour. I find the name, also the title, very, very intriguing and interesting. I'm sure that this particular lecture series will create a very vibrant space for a very meaningful academic exchange on questions that are both intellectually rich and, most importantly, politically consequential. At the outset, I would like to extend my very, very sincere appreciation to the Seidel Foundation India for their continued commitment to fostering scholarly dialogue and for partnering with us in this very important initiative. I also warmly acknowledge the Comparative Federalists Research Group, Department of Political Science, University of Delhi, and our esteemed collaborators at the University of Passau. This hybrid format, which brings together participants across geographies, reflects not just a very innovative logistical innovation, but also a shared academic vision which is collaborative, which is inclusive, and very forward-looking. I stand before you in the capacity of Chairperson International Relations for the University of Delhi. This is indeed a very exciting time for us because subsequent to the NEP 2020, the Government of India is very keen that we broaden and deepen our internationalization initiatives. And therefore, this particular program that we have today is very meaningful and very relevant. As many within the audience may know, that we are opening ourselves up to a plethora of international collaborations and partnerships with top-ranking foreign higher educational institutions and other international institutions which support cutting-edge research and academic engagement. In fact, we have a number of meaningful MOUs already with many distinguished universities, and many, many more universities are reaching out to us to formalize a diversity of agreements with our faculties, with our departments, and with our colleges. In fact, I've just come back, from a meeting with a Russian delegation. We also have another very important, program that we are going to be launching very soon, and that is our semester abroad or our semester away program that we are launching very soon for specific semesters, both for undergraduate students and postgraduate students. I mean, that is just about to be announced. We are just formalizing and finalizing the SOPs. So we are certainly looking forward to a very rich and a very vibrant chapter of internationalization at the University of Delhi. So in this context, I repeat again that the program today is very meaningful, and we sincerely acknowledge the contribution of our esteemed partners in this. We are particularly fortunate to have with us today our distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. Anil Swaroopji, whose administrative experience and policy insights promise to enrich our understanding of the evolving dynamics of public policy and competitive federalism in India. I'm confident that his reflections will provoke both thought and discussion. I would also like to make a special mention of Senior Professor Rekha Saxena, Head of the Department of Political Science, whose intellectual leadership and sustained efforts have been instrumental in conceptualizing and steering many meaningful academic engagements. Initiatives like this do not emerge in isolation. I'm sure we all know that, but they are built on a vision, a shared vision for a brighter future, core persistence, and a deep commitment to academic excellence. Let me also make a moment to highlight that this lecture series unfolds under the very able leadership of our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Yogesh Singh. Under his guidance, the University of Delhi has consistently sought to expand its academic horizons and consolidate international collaborations. We look forward to taking this partnership with the Seidel Foundation and the University of Passau to even greater heights in the years to come. With these words, I welcome you once again and look forward to a very stimulating and engaging session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for those thoughtful and inspiring words. To welcome everyone and set the context for today's lecture, I now invite Senior Professor Rekha Saxena, Head, Department of Political Science, University of Delhi, to deliver the welcome remarks and context setting.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and friends. It is my privilege to welcome you all to this session of Federalism Hour, a lecture series that seeks to engage, interrogate, and reimagine the relationship between federalism and economic development in contemporary contexts. Let me extend a very warm welcome to our inaugural speaker, Professor Neera Agnimitra ji, who has been very supportive in such academic endeavors. Our keynote speaker, Shri Anil Sarup ji, for graciously agreeing to our request and for being the keynote speaker. Our moderator, Ms. Judith Vedbagar Singh, who is the moving force behind this entire event, and all the participants who have joined us this afternoon. I also wish to acknowledge our institutional collaborators, the Seidel Foundation and the University of Passau, Professor Soren Kyle in particular. This collaboration, I think, itself is a testament to the transnational relevance of federalism as both a political idea and governance practice. Now, let me begin briefly to situate today's lecture within a broader intellectual and policy framework. Federalism, as we all know, is not merely a constitutional arrangement. Rather, it is a dynamic process. It is a way of organizing power across multiple levels of governments. But more importantly, I would say it is a way of negotiating diversity, managing conflicts, and enabling cooperation. Now, in the classical terms, if you see, federalism was often understood through a structural lens of division of powers, written constitution, independent judiciary, etc. But over time, the focus has shifted from structure to process. Most importantly, I think it has shifted from what federalism is to what federalism does. And what federalism does, especially in a country like India, which is deeply intertwined with questions of development. Now, the very phrase competitive federalism has gained considerable traction in policy discourse over the last decade. It is often presented as a mechanism through which states compete to attract investment, improve governance standards, and enhance service delivery. So rankings, indices, ease of doing business metrics, they have become the very visible instruments of this competition. In fact, I would say that federalism in practice operates through a delicate balance of competition and cooperation. If you see the literature on federalism, it has increasingly referred to this as cooperative, competitive federalism, or what I have also in my writings described as collaborative federalism. So the key question, therefore, is not whether these states compete, but how they compete, on what terms they compete, and with what consequences they compete. So if you see from a theoretical standpoint, I would say that competitive federalism draws from the idea that decentralization enhances efficiency. So the classic economic argument suggests that subnational governments, being closer to the people, they are better placed to tailor policies to local needs. And this leads to innovation and policy experimentation, and ultimately better outcomes. However, I think the competition can also generate asymmetries, because not all states begin from the same baseline. There are differences in fiscal capacity, institutional strength, human capital, natural resources, and also historical trajectories. Meaning thereby that competition can sometimes reinforce, existing inequalities rather than reduce them. So in such context, I think the role of union government becomes very crucial. And it becomes not merely as an arbiter, but as an enabler of balanced development. So this brings us to the domain of public policy, which is the operational arena where federal principles are translated into outcomes. It is also important to note that public policy in a federal system is inherently multi-layered. Policies, they are really designed or implemented by single level of government. Instead, they involve complex interactions, both vertical between center and the states and horizontal among the states. So schemes are negotiated, they are adapted, resisted, reinterpreted across jurisdictions. So take, for instance, sectors like education, health, or infrastructure. These are not just administrative categories, they are deeply political spaces where questions of authority, questions of accountability, and resource allocation, they are constantly renegotiated. Well, in recent years, I would say India has witnessed significant shifts in this policy landscape. Institutions like Niti Aayog, National Institute for Transforming India, have attempted to reframe center-state relations by emphasizing cooperative mechanisms, data-driven governance, and outcome-based evaluation. At the same time, fiscal federalism has undergone transformation, particularly with the implementation of Goods and Services Tax, GST, which represents both an instance of cooperative decision-making and a site of ongoing contestation. So when we speak of competitive federalism today, we must ask certain questions. First, is competition leading to genuine policy innovation or merely to symbolic compliance with central benchmarks? Second, are states empowered to experiment or are they constrained by fiscal and regulatory frameworks? Third, does this competition enhance accountability to citizens, or does it redirect accountability upwards towards ranking institutions and central authorities? And so these are not merely academic questions. Rather, I think they go to the very heart of how governance is experienced on the ground. Another important dimension which is worth considering is the political economy of federalism. So federalism, does not operate in a vacuum. It is shaped by political incentives, factors like electoral competition, party system transformation, leadership styles. They all influence how states engage with the idea of competition. For instance, states which are governed by different political parties, they may approach, central initiatives differently. They may see them sometimes as opportunities, sometimes as impositions. So this interplay between politics and policy adds a layer of complexity that cannot be ignored. Now, another crucial point that I would like to make is that at the same time, we must also recognize the normative dimension of federalism. That federalism is not just about efficiency. It is also about equity. It is also about representation. It is also about inclusion. A purely competitive framework, risk privileging outcomes over processes, efficiency over justice. Therefore, any meaningful discussion of competitive federalism must, remain attentive to questions of distributive fairness and social justice. In other words, I would say the challenge is not to choose between competition and cooperation, but to design institutional arrangements that harness the strengths of both. So this is precisely why today's lecture is so timely. We are at a moment where India's development trajectory is increasingly, being shaped by subnational dynamics. States are no longer passive, recipients of policy. They are active agents, negotiating, innovating, and sometimes even contesting the terms of engagement. So now in this evolving landscape, I think insights from practitioners become very invaluable. And this brings to our keynote speaker, Shri Anil Sarupji. Mr. Sarup brings with him a rare combination of administrative experience and policy insight. Having served in key positions across sectors, including education and coal, he has been closely involved in some of the most complex governance challenges in India. His perspective allows us to move beyond abstract theorizing and engage with the lived realities of policy making in the federal context. I'm certain that his address will help us bridge the gap between theory and practice, between how federalism is conceptualized and how it is operationalized. Before I conclude, let me emphasize one final point. Federalism is often described as a living system. It evolves, it adapts, and sometimes resists. Its vitality, I think, depends not only on constitutional provisions, but on the quality of dialogue between institutions and between ideas. Platforms such as these lecture series, they are not merely, therefore, academic exercises, but spaces, where such dialogue can unfold. So on that note, I once again welcome all of you and thank you all for being part of this conversation. I now have the pleasure of inviting Shri Anil Sarupji to deliver the keynote address. Thank you so much.
A very good afternoon to all of you. My young friends and not so young friends, you decide where you stand. When British left this country, obviously they were not just to us, but whatever justice we had in this country, they took with them. And they left behind laws, in-laws, outlaws, sons-in-laws, and thought that these laws, outlaws, sons-in-laws will solve our problems. And hence we keep discussing laws. We keep discussing policies. My experience as a civil servant 38 years revealed that we do not have problems with laws. We may have problems with outlaws and sons-in-laws who interpret those laws, but certainly not laws. While attempting to write and researching on my 6th book, I studied the British system in late 18th and 19th century about corruption, and whatever they did to remove corruption has already been done in India, yet corruption stays. So the problem is not with laws or policies. So that's point number one. Point number two is, as I talk to you, there are different levels of people I'm trying to address, or institutions. I will address center, the states, the bureaucracies, and you. Most of my talk will be in regard to you. What can you do? Because it's easy for me to tell those that are not present in this room as to what they should do. That's the easiest thing to do. In any case, I come from UP, where I have more Rai Sahabs, the advisors, than anything else. Being a practitioner myself, I will tell you what you all can do. You are students of political science. What contribution can you make to this discussion that's going on? And then I come to this topic, and I'm so glad Dr. Saxena has made my task easy, because I was wondering, why are we talking of competition? We should be talking about cooperation. Competition, if any, should come at the end, last 10%. With competing, look what we've done to ourselves. We had this lion of Make in India roaring at the loudest, and no one questioned how much distance it traveled. No one questioned. But it was roaring. I was traveling abroad also, and I see big cutouts of lions sitting there. Two of the most important constituents of Make in India were, number one, that manufacturing will increase from the then 13% in 2014 to 25%. The other was improvement in employment. In both these segments, it's failed. Now let me address some of you. Some of you should examine it. First, admit the fact that it failed, and then examine whether it failed. Because if you don't admit and examine, it will be merely an academic discussion. Examine why it failed so that you don't commit the same mistake again. And one of the reasons was this facade of competition among states. You know what they did? I was then in the government and I used to question this. They created a ladder, and this ladder was created by World Bank, where we were claiming credit by climbing up this ladder in ease of doing business. From 100 plus to we reached, I think, 34th or something, by which time the World Bank decided that the ladder was wrong, they took the ladder away. And I often used to wonder, why should there be a determination by an external agency like World Bank to find whether we are going up the ladder or not? Similarly, our own Niti Aayog determines its own ladder for determining the inter-say competition of the states. So when the principal ladder was gone, even this ladder was gone. So nothing happened. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, first of all, I think I'm not the one in for competition. I'm a great believer in learning from each other, something which is fundamentally wrong with our education system also, something which I couldn't correct. We are competing with each other without realizing that each individual, each institution is very different from the other. If there is anything that needs to be done is to improve ourselves, to benchmark yourself and see how do you compete with yourself. And that should be true of any institution as well. Yes, as you go about doing that, how about learning from others? And there's so much to learn. I'll come to that when I go through the slides. In fact, I'm not a powerful person, but I was asked to make a PowerPoint presentation. This is meant only for powerful people. I'm making one. And I'll come to these points on what damage it is doing, this competition part, and what is the alternative available. And I would suggest, and I'll keep suggesting to all of you sitting here, examine these aspects. Question the approach that is being adopted, because I'm a great believer that we have absolutely no control over results, but if the processes are right, then I think we might move in the right direction. That's what I learned in my life. So, first point, structure and function of federalism in India. I won't waste much of my time. It's there in the books. I had to make a presentation. I've listed them down here. I will discuss on where are we now as a consequence of the structures that we have, as a consequence of the practices that we have, where we are. That's very important, because I have believed that if you don't understand the context where you are, solutions will not be possible. For finding problems or solution to any problem, you have to first accept the existence of that problem, then understand the context. Thereafter, you have not merely to give ideas. I will not give you just ideas, because I am a great believer that there's no dearth of ideas in this country. You walk down the street, everyone has a solution to a problem. But for any idea to fructify and sustain in a country like ours, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, judicially tenable, emotionally relatable, and environmentally sustainable. Now, let me not dissuade you from thinking aloud or thinking in terms of bringing about changes, because it is possible. But you have to understand this context, this political context, this emotional context, this financial context. If you don't understand these contexts, you may come up with a good theoretical model, but that will not work on the ground. And even if it works, it won't sustain. So I will try and see, when I come to the suggestion, the last part, way forward, I'll try and test these on these aspects. All these are determined by my personal experience. Most of my time I'll spend on my personal experience, because I lived and existed in this so-called competition that exists between center and the state, not between states. That was the real problem. The real problem is not competition between the states. The real problem, as has emerged in the past decade or so, is the unnecessary competition between center and state. And I have a few suggestions to offer here. So this is the constitutional and legal structure, the administrative structure, the financial structures. I'll just rush through these slides. They will be circulated to you. You can go through that. It's all available in the books. Okay, how it has evolved over the years. This is very important, because if you understand this historical context, you will understand what is happening now. As very correctly pointed out by Dr. Saxena, federalism evolves, absolutely. There's no institution that remains static. This relationship has evolved over years. 50 to 67, by and large, smooth, dominant center, yet states were all the same as the center, except places like Kerala and all. There wasn't much of a problem. Very smooth existence. Then came the difficult second stage. And then we started using, which was then, I don't know if it's still there, the famous Article 356, started getting used in 67, 77, big time. And then we had this famous 42nd Amendment, so on and so forth. All those amendments happened. It happens in the course of any country. So it's not very unusual. I don't like it very unusual because we are an evolving democracy and we were learning. Then came the phase, the third phase between 77 and 89. Again, very unstable phase that we had. Then the stability began, and today we are in a different phase altogether. What has happened as a consequence of what has happened? Look at the social divide in the north and the south. It is a shocker, absolutely, and it's growing by the day. And this is government data, so I'm not creating any data. That north is nowhere near the south in terms of HDI. And almost all the southern states are marching ahead. It's going to create a major problem for us. Not many people are discussing this today. What is this happening? And it is not merely a one-time phenomena. The tragedy is not is that this divide is there. The tragedy is that this hiatus is growing, and these are again government indicators. Look at what is happening in the economic domain. There again, there is a similarity here. The southern states are marching ahead. They are growing at the rate of 13, 14, 15%. On an average, we may say we are growing at the rate of 7%, 8%, whatever that case may be. But that average is determined by the greater growth of the southern states that hiatus seem to be improving. And you know what's the worst part? The political divide between north and south. Now, if you juxtapose all that there is a social hiatus, there's an economic hiatus, and there's a political hiatus, and then there is delimitation happening. A recipe for disaster. What are we doing? Is this what we want? We are pushing the southern states into a corner. Is it necessary to do that? Does it serve anybody's purpose except politicians' purpose? Is there some other way out? That's what I'm going to discuss. The idea of painting this picture before you, and this picture is based on facts. You know, just as a matter of aside, 2 years ago when I was invited by Harvard to deliver a talk, I had the privilege of writing a few pages about the government. In first 4 pages, I really appreciated the great things that are happening, and I believe wonderful things are happening. In second half, I've damned the government for many things. So they asked me, sir, आप अभी तक बचे हुए कैसे हैं? मैंने कहा वो भी डिसाइड नहीं कर पाए मैं फॉर हूँ या अगेंस्ट हूँ. जिस दिन कर लेंगे मेरी भी लाइन लग जाएगी. The point is, as students, you should not be biased. Try not to be biased. I know it's a very difficult world. You should have the courage to look at facts and come to your conclusion based on facts that the women reservation bill had already been passed in the parliament. Who are we trying to fool? And we get fooled. So as youngsters, you should question facts. You should understand facts. You should look at facts. Whatever I'm going to tell you henceforth are based on facts and personal experience. Reflect on it. Don't go by what I'm saying is, these charts that I've shown here, please go and have a look at it again. Is there this divide from north and south coming? Is it good for the country? Is there a way forward? That's what I'm going to talk about. I'm not here to criticize anybody. I'm trying to paint a picture before you based on facts, and let us see what we can do now. That's what I've done throughout my career. Look at what can be done. And I'm being an optimist, I believe a lot can be done. And that's what I'm going to spend most of my time on. So look at, let me give you some personal experience. And I'll give you the context in which I was working. Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which came to be recognized world over as one of the finest health insurance scheme, which has now morphed into Ayushman Bharat. There's a very interesting case in this, how it became Ayushman Bharat. I was Secretary School Education. last year of my career, 3 months before my retirement, I get a call from Principal Secretary to Prime Minister, who I had worked with him when he was Principal Secretary to Mr. Kalyan Singh, the Chief Minister of UP, and I was Secretary, so we knew each other. He calls me up and says, Anil, तुम आके जरा प्रधानमंत्री जी को इंश्योरेंस समझा दो, हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस। मैंने कहा मैं तो एजुकेशन सेक्रेटरी हूँ। नहीं अरे तुमने बड़ी अच्छी स्कीम चलाई थी, पिछले 3 साल से हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हर बार प्राइम मिनिस्टर नाराज हो जाते हैं। तो मैंने कहा सर आप मेरी डांट पड़वाना चाह रहे हैं? नहीं आके कोशिश करो, बड़ी अच्छी स्कीम थी। सो आई सेड मेरा लोकल स्टैंड आई क्या है? बोले आज शाम को हेल्थ पे एक डिस्कशन हम एजुकेशन पे भी रखा देते हैं, अगर वो तुमसे पूछे तो बता देना। दिस इज द कॉन्वर्सेशन आई एम टेलिंग यू इन हिंदी बिकॉज दैट्स हाउ इट हैपेंड. Sometimes translation doesn't give you the sense. So in the evening, I go to Prime Minister's residence. Health Secretary makes a presentation, and after that, the Prime Minister is slightly annoyed. He said, "कि आप लोग insurance company की क्यों हिमायत करते हैं?" Then he turns towards me, "अनिल जी आप रहे हैं, आपकी क्या राय है?" मेरी राय वही थी जो Health Secretary की थी. But I packaged this differently. I spoke for 15 minutes. You know, you all know Prime Minister is a fantastic speaker, absolutely no doubt about it, but he's a better listener. 15 minutes he heard me out. At the end of it, he tells me, "Anil ji, आप सही कह रहे हैं, health insurance तो होनी चाहिए." And then as I was walking out of the room, Joint Secretary to the PMO, he asked me, "Sir, आपको तो पता था नाराज हो जाते हैं, फिर भी आपने अपनी बात कह दी." हमने कहा, मुझे ना इनसे अभी कुछ चाहिए, ना रिटायरमेंट के बाद कुछ चाहिए, जो ठीक समझा कह दिया, मानते तो मानते, नहीं मानते. This is the background of this wonderful scheme. Now, while implementing the scheme, that's where the center-state relationship came to the fore. This scheme was implemented during the UPA government. And mind you, the best performing states during that government were states ruled by opposition. Chhattisgarh, finest performing state. How did this happen? And how is it not happening now? That's what I want you to understand. Someone should research this. How did it happen then? Because then there was a disconnect between political understanding and administrative action on the ground. I said, when I went to Chhattisgarh, the Chief Minister was from the BJP, and he gave me a very patient hearing. And he was convinced that this scheme has to be done. And Chhattisgarh came to be the best scheme. The other was the LDF government in Kerala, the another performing state. You know, I distinctly remember when I made this presentation on RSBY before Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. She was then the chairperson of, what was that, National Advisory Council or something. So she was pleasantly surprised to find कि उनकी गवर्नमेंट इतना अच्छा काम कर रही है. देखिए, ये भी एक मजा था उस गवर्नमेंट में. उनको पता ही नहीं था अच्छा काम हो रहा है. फिर जब मैंने उन्हें बताया कि the 3 best performing states are opposition ruled states, तो उनके चेहरे से next day I started getting calls from chief secretaries, क्या करना है, क्या करना है. See, the point that I'm trying to make here is, what we did was, we reached out to states. Now, this is the point I'm trying to make here. What is my outreach to the states? Am I treating the opposition-ruled states as enemies or adversaries? At a political level, it will happen. I'm jumping on to my experience as coal secretary. Let me give you, because then the government has changed, and for some good reason, this government also wanted me there to sort a crisis. Before that, Dr. Manmohan Singh also wanted me. But I had learnt it the hard way, that let politicians fight amongst themselves, but we should reach out. Look at what happens in coal. Coal is a classic example of cooperative federalism. Fortunately, at that point in time, we had this master strategist, Arun Jaitley, there. He knew what cooperative federalism was. He was engaging with every opposition-ruled chief minister at that point in time. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee was still firing salvos at the central government, and central government was shooting at her. The war was going on. How do I get my land? Because as luck would have us in coal, all coal existed in opposition-ruled states. West Bengal, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, all were opposition. How do you get land from there? So that is where you have to dissociate politics with action on the ground. And instead of you looking at states as monoliths, find soft spots in those states. What are those soft spots? So in West Bengal, the chief secretary was a very fine person. So though he was junior to me, I said, I'll come to you. I mean, one thing that I did, people ask me, how did coal happen? I said, as Secretary Coal Government of India, I didn't convene a single meeting in Delhi. there was a signal to be given here. Sometimes what happens is, I'm digressing a bit again, we believe that we are the great people sitting in Delhi. We in Delhi feel that all wisdom lies here. How wrong we are, I started saying that center is a fiction. Action is in the state. If states don't work, what will happen to the center? And why are you fighting with each other? Whose purpose is it serving? So I went over to Kolkata, sat with the chief secretary, took a piece of paper with me, in which I had written how much money is the state government losing by way of royalty and how much employment are they losing by not giving that land, which is in any case fallow, nothing's happening there. And I told him I can write a letter to you. And 6 years down the line, some CAG will pick up my letter and say, the West Bengal, wo to notional loss aa gaya tha na, itna loss ho gaya. And I don't believe in writing letters. I want to talk to you. Because I don't know Bangla, you're going to explain to your chief minister that politics aside, the state is losing. I don't know what he said. Within 48 hours, I got land for 7 blocks. Unthinkable at that point in time. So the question is, structures shall remain the same, policy shall remain the same. How are we functioning on the ground? Can we demonstrate the efficacy of keeping communications going in making things happen? That is what each one of you should examine and see. If certain scheme or a program of the government has succeeded, what exactly was done in this political environment that we have? That needs to happen. And that then can become the benchmark for others to emulate. They can see, okay, अब हम कोई politician को तो समझा नहीं सकते. What can I tell a politician? आप ऐसा कीजिए, वैसा कीजिए. No. Each one of us has to define a role in the given context. I can't do a nut to a politician. But a lot can be done in that political framework. That needs to be understood, analyzed, highlighted, and presented in a manner that it becomes acceptable to the person that you're talking to, that despite this set of circumstances, this can be done because it has been done. Give you another example. We wanted this bill to be passed in the parliament. I mean, these days we discuss bills in parliament and outside parliament. In those days also, the government did not have majority in the Rajya Sabha. And this was desperate times because Supreme Court had cancelled all the blocks, coal blocks, and they had to be auctioned. They couldn't be auctioned without amending the bill. How do you get people to accept that in the Rajya Sabha? So I sought permission from my minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal. I told him, sir, I have worked with Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge before. I have a good personal relationship with him. If you permit, I'll go and have a word with him. Ha, kaho jao. So I rang up Mr. Kharge. He came on the line. और अनिल क्या हाल है? This, मैंने कहा सर आपके साथ पकौड़ी खानी है. वो पकौड़ी खिलाते थे बढ़िया. हाँ आ जाओ. मैंने सर कल आ जाऊँ. हाँ आ जाओ. मैं गया सुबह. बढ़िया पकौड़ी रखी थी, चाय रखी थी. खाना शुरू किया. मैंने कहा साहब आपसे आई हैव कम फॉर अ रिक्वेस्ट टू यू. बताओ. मैंने कहा सर मुझे पता है कि आप यू विल अपोज दिस बिल एंड आई एम नॉट आस्किंग यू टू सपोर्ट द बिल. मैं एक रिक्वेस्ट करने आया हूँ. क्या? मैंने कहा सर आप वेल में मत आइएगा हाउस के, इस पे बहस होने दीजिएगा. अरे अनिल हमारी पार्टी में कहाँ डिसीजन होता है. मैंने कहा सर मैं तो आप तक पहुँच है, मैं आपसे रिक्वेस्ट कर सकता हूँ. What happens the next day? The party doesn't come to the well. The bill gets cleared and coal block auctions succeeded. India, from acute shortage of coal, was then toying with the idea of exporting coal to Bangladesh. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, given this whatever political system we have, can you and I, the youngsters, the people who are working in the academics, can they tie up with bureaucrats? I used to look for youngsters they do a lot of work for me. Can we do that? Or you can come up with a paper that politicians should do this, politicians should do this, center should do this, state should do this. It will be paper no one will read. Define a role for yourself. If you all, I was suggesting to your HOD, that if 2-3 of you could sit around and just examine and see what happened, why it happened, how it happened, then probably there can be a better understanding between the center and state. At least there are people who want to have a better understanding, can have that understanding. That's what I'm trying to say here. So I've had experience as project monitoring group. There again, this is the last phase of UPA government, UPA 2, and all sanctions have stopped, all clearances have stopped. I am suddenly summoned by the cabinet secretary and asked to head a project monitoring group to fast-track projects, each of which was more than 1,000 crore in every state. How do you do that? Again, going down to states, conveying a value propositions. My young friends, this is very important for you. Whenever you talk to anybody, whether you are HOD or to a bureaucrat or anybody, you have to convey a value proposition. What is in it for him or her in accepting the idea that you're giving? I used to do that with politicians also. That is where, if you are talking in terms of making things happen on the ground, in making states move, you have to convey to them in whatever you write or speak as to how is it beneficial to them. So in all these, whether it was coal or project monitoring group, and more so in school education, oh my God, this competition part got on my nerves in school education. I said, how do you expect schooling to be compared between Kerala and Bihar? And Niti Aayog had come up with, various parameters. This state is on the top, this is at, but I said, what is this going on? What Niti Aayog should do is to demonstrate the efficacy of success stories in a particular region, in that particular region. Why? Because what is working in Rajasthan may work in UP, but what is working in Kerala may not work in UP because the contexts are different. This is what the center has to do. This is what Niti Aayog has to do. This analysis needs to be done, and I would suggest all of you to do that. If a particular good activity or good policy is working on the ground, analyze that and see the replicability of that policy in adjoining states. Don't present it as a thesis. You can do that for academic interest. But if you want to make things happen, you have to present it to the people so that they're able to relate to what is happening. So if something is happening in Kerala, a guy in UP will never be able to relate to it for a simple reason. When Dr. Kasturi Rangan came to meet me and the national education policy was being formulated, he asked me for my suggestions. I said, you're wasting your time. He said, why? You all have set up this group. I said, you will come up with a fantastic policy. And indeed, the national education policy is the finest document that I have ever come across. And that is probably the reason that everyone is struggling to implement that policy. I mean, if a teacher doesn't go to school in Kerala, he or she will be lynched. In UP, the ticket has a right not to go to the school. How you can have the same policy for Kerala and UP? So I told him, have a broad framework, and that's, again, cooperative federalism, allow space to states. You don't allow space to everything is cut and dried here, as if all the wisdom resides here. When the legislation, the Right to Education Act was formulated, they decided how many schools will be set up after every 5 kilometers or 3 kilometers. How in the hell you can have the same parameter for Delhi and Rajasthan? I don't know, this whole principle of believing that all wisdom resides in Delhi is broad national framework you can have, but leave the states alone. They're also elected, and this is a problem not only with politicians. It's a problem with bureaucrats also. I remember when we used to have meeting in the cabinet secretariat, cabinet secretary presiding, all secretary used to curse the state governments. One day I told them, yaar, tum bhi to wahin se aaye ho yaar. Try and understand wo agar nahi kar rahe, kyun nahi kar rahe? Try and understand them. In education, it was criminal, absolutely, deciding and defining everything in Delhi. And I made some beginning there. I said, give flexibility to the state. Let us trust states. Why aren't we trusting states? How can we define everything sitting here? So what we really need to do, and that comes in the next slide, what is the way forward? Of course, I don't believe in major issues or structures. Let's look at real issues. First, reflect over it. You are students, you should. आपकी अभी नौकरी नहीं लगी, आपकी नौकरी खतरे में नहीं है, लेकिन सोचिए जरूर. Reflect over it. Is there some problem there? Is it happening? Are we treating states like adversaries? Using governors to harass states? I've seen it personally. One chief minister was in tears before me, before the lieutenant governor was harassing her no end. Please tell me if the time, there's no. I wish there were clock here. I still have 10 minutes. Is that okay? Okay. So stop treating like adversaries. Look at instances after instances, the states feel harassed. Is this the way to start cooperative federalism or promote cooperative federalism? This needs to be discussed. You have to list out clear instances, and I have a way forward. I keep telling you, there is a way forward. You don't have to necessarily fight with them. I negotiated with Mamata Banerjee. Arun Jaitley negotiated with the Chief Minister of Odisha. He was a great negotiator. Sit down. GST is a classic example of negotiation and coming to conclusions, but under the inspired leadership of Arun Jaitley. You have to have that sagacity to sit with people and discuss. Differences of opinion are natural in democracies. Sit down and discuss. Why should you break communication channels? This is sad state of affairs. You have to focus on consensus building. This can be done because this has been done. Now, one of you could sit down and do a research on what went behind GST for GST to happen. Everyone knows this is what happened. But there's a lot that happened. How did negotiations happen? How did Mr. Arun Jaitley negotiate with the states? How did he bring them on board? What were the differences of opinion? How were the differences of opinion were sorted out? Some differences still remained there. Now here we have Pakistan mediating between Iran and USA. And we don't have a mediator sitting in India to mediate between center and state. What is this going on? And we want to become a world leader. We have to sit and discuss. We cannot say, वो सुनता नहीं है. आप कोई ऐसे बोलिए ना सुनाए. मैं आपको फिर थोड़ा digress कर रहा हूँ. I know we are running out of time, but I must tell you this. I was special secretary to Mayawati. And before that, I was secretary to Mr. Kalyan Singh. Chalk and cheese. Very difficult. She used to suspend district magistrate in a meeting. Commissioner suspend कर देती थी. How do you handle her, yaar? So what we did was, and this is an art that you should learn, we used to observe her very closely, and she was in the best of her moods when she was having breakfast in the morning. वो पालती मार के मैगी खाती थी, और मैगी वो सुड़क सुड़क करके खाती थी. No, there's no अंग्रेजी phrase for सुड़क. और उस समय सबसे खुश होती थी. तो जो हमें काम कराना होता था उस समय करा लेते. This is important. This is a great skill that you have to have. तो हम सुबह गए वहां पर. मैंने कहा मैडम वो आपने अधिकारी को सस्पेंड कर दिया, बड़ा अच्छा अधिकारी है, बट गलती हो गई उससे. नो मेनी पीपल हैव क्रिटिसाइज्ड मी कि उसकी तो गलती नहीं थी, तुमने कैसे कह दिया गलती थी. अरे भाई मैं उनसे कहता उनकी गलती थी तो मैं भी सस्पेंड हो जाता. सो यही होता है यहाँ पर. सेंटर स्टेट में लड़ाई हो रही है ना, तो हर चीज पर लड़ाई हो रही है. अरे भाई फाइंड आउट कॉमन ग्राउंड. फिर मैंने कहा उनसे, मैडम अधिकारी बहुत अच्छा, किसी से भी गलती हो सकती है, उससे भी हो सकती है, मुझसे भी हो सकती है. अच्छा अधिकारी है, अच्छा ठीक है बहाल कर दे. Within a minute he was instated. I am not saying that you should adopt that technique here, but my contention is, if we go with a bias to negotiate with somebody, then you will not have negotiation. And there is a visible bias. हर चीज जो कह रहे हो गलत है, so you can't have that. Then use of central agencies. My God, what's going on? कल तक चक्की पीसिंग यहाँ पे डिप्टी चीफ मिनिस्टर. How can you have that? How can you have that? Someone should speak up. What's this going on? And you talk of cooperation. What sort of competition you talk about? We can't have that. And as students, you must discuss this. I'm not saying you should agitate. No. I don't believe in revolutions because all revolutions have led to dictatorship. I'm sorry to say that as a student of history. Whether it was Russian Revolution, except the non-revolution in Britain, most of the revolutions have led to dictatorship. No. But you must think and talk and discuss what's this going on. That won't happen. Then, as I mentioned earlier, what should be the role of Niti Aayog? Niti Aayog, to my mind, should focus on the good cooperative activity that is happening in the states. A lot of it is happening. GST is a classic example, but there are good models that are emerging in the states. I would suggest to all of you, pick up. आप में से एक जना केरला ले ले, एक जना राजस्थान ले ले, और वहां पे देखें कि कौन सा अच्छा काम हो रहा है. आप अपनी रिसर्च के साथ वो भी कीजिए. Do that. And then work out at length as to why is this succeeding. What went into the success of those models, and then present those models to other states. You create that forum. I started a movement called Nexus of Good Post-Retirement with the principal idea of demonstrating good work to others to demonstrate that good can happen because good is happening. If all the rascals and the ruffians of the world can come together and make life difficult for us, why shouldn't good people come together? But you have to identify that good work. You have to understand that good work. You can do that. So instead of competition between state, I did that in case of UP. We came out with a formulation for education action plan for UP, and we picked up models from Rajasthan, MP, and Chhattisgarh. We felt that the terrains are similar, and that can be replicated here. So that is precisely what we do. Of course, the last point is, this is again another sleight of hand we had. Levies after education says, this says, that says, because that says doesn't get distributed to states. So what are we trying to do? So broadly speaking, what I'm trying to say here is that, first of all, I think the narrative has to change. It is not to be competition. I would suggest change the topic. Keep competition there, but at the end of it, first it should be cooperation between the states. Cooperation between center and state. I know it's an anathema today. It appears paradoxical that we are talking of cooperation between center and state, but I am an optimist. If we pick up models like GST, we can demonstrate that cooperation does work. But ताली दोनों हाथ से बजती है, और बड़े भाई को ताली बजानी पड़ती है, start लेना पड़ता है. So that beginning has to be made. And you can, as students, demonstrate that wherever this initiative was taken by the center, it worked to the benefit of the state as well as the center. Wherever this cooperation happened between state A and state B, both the states were beneficiary. बड़ा सिंपल है, अगर मैं कॉम्पीट करूंगा तो अपनी कॉपी छुपा लूंगा, दूसरे से कॉम्पीट करूंगा, अपने से कॉम्पीट करूंगा, दूसरे से सीखूंगा. So you have to come up with these models, all students. You know, I'm not addressing to politicians today or bureaucrats today or center or the state. They're not sitting here. When I talk to them, I talk to the language that they understand. To you all, I would suggest research on this. Try and look at such aspects where cooperation has worked. Try and also examine where competition hasn't worked. Make in India being one of the classiest examples. Say why it failed. Not to criticize, but to understand that yes, we committed a mistake, we shall not commit the mistake again. What states can do a lot, but none of them is sitting here. I just listed them out here. I mean, states also have this problem. They sit everyone from the center, har cheez galat ho rahi hai. I mean, it is not that. I mean, none of the state representatives are sitting here, so I'm not elaborating this. Again, second point to me is the most important thing. Learn from other states. So many states are doing it. I can give many examples, but I would suggest you look at it and see what you can do. Third is critical, absolutely. Davos is not the place to attract investment. Ease of doing business has to be felt by the industry, not people sitting in Davos or announcement made in Davos. You can make functioning easy. You go to Tamil Nadu and you'll understand what I'm saying. They have actually made business easy there. This is another interesting experiment happening in Haryana where they are doing away with physical interface between common man and the government, reducing corruption dramatically. That can be replicated elsewhere. There are many such examples that can be done. As I said, focus on streamlining the procedures. Your own procedures. Learn if somebody else has streamlined. Today, technology allows you to do away with physical interface, reduce corruption, and reduce many problems that the industry face. And of course, fiscal discipline is something which you can talk till cows come home. This is what the state needs to do. I think this is what we need. Cooperative federalism is the way forward, not competitive federalism. Thank you very much for inviting me here. God bless you.
Before we take some questions from the audience, and we have already received some with which I will start our conversation, let me just once again briefly recapitulate. So the key, like the essence of your statement or hypothesis is maybe, and the critical minds here in the audience might also question that, competitive federalism failed or is not working for India at this stage.
No, I didn't mean to say that. I said the narrative has to change. You should first talk about cooperative federalism and bring in competition as a component of that. You cannot merely talk of competition. That's my thrust.
Right. So when you look at, like zooming out a bit now from the topic of federalism and the overall trajectory of India, where it's positioned today, and the ambition that it has as as a growing power. We also talk about Viksit Bharat, which is the vision of India to become a developed industrial nation by its 100th anniversary as an independent republic. What would be, according to you, 3 imperatives for India to reach Viksit Bharat when applying what you just said, that you have to change the narrative, first bet on cooperative federalism and then gradually move to competitive federalism? How does that equation add up to achieving India becoming a developed nation?
Let me confess first, I will not be allowed alive in 2047. I'll talk of now, what India needs to do now. Number 1, focus on education. It is a shocker that the education policy says that 6% of GDP should go to education. This year's budget has an allocation which is less than last year. So without education, how will we become Viksit Bharat? No amount of competition or competitive federalism is going to help us until the populace is properly, appropriately, qualitatively educated. That is one. Second, the focus has to be on improving our processes. We don't sufficiently talk about it. I mean, I've been in industry, I've spoken to industrialists. We talk of fiscal incentives, financial incentives. No. The real problem are the processes. And mind you, wherever, in whichever state these processes have been improved, which they have, I was mentioning Tamil Nadu, look at the investment flow in that state. So that makes a world of a difference. We need to learn from those states where processes have improved. So that's the second point, instead of focusing on other things. Third, if investment has to improve, where I think the country is doing very well, the improvement in infrastructure. Because the logistics cost is killing. So the ports are improving, the roads are improving. That's an area where we should learn. That is where things have happened in this country. We must try and understand how are they happening so well in that sector and not so well in other sectors. So these are the 3 sectors. If you look at education, processes, and infrastructure, I think we'll reach the destination that we want to reach in 2047.
Right, thank you very much. Just another point, maybe coming from a perspective from Europe. So if you look at federal systems there, for example, Switzerland, Germany, there, of course, in today's lecture is titled Public Policy and Competitive Federalism, so I'm coming back to that again and again. Kind of healthy competition helps at a state level to develop specialization, niche, and therefore also market potential or opportunities that are being taken up by businesses and investments eventually. How do you look at this
I don't think competition has anything to do with it. If a state has a particular specialization, so be it. That's specialized for that state. How does competition help here? I keep repeating this. There's so many good things that are happening in other states. Learn from them. If you have a specialization in that state, there's no competition. You are specialized in A, the other state specializes in B. What is the competition there? But there are some fundamental underlying factors that determine success. And those factors, you don't have to compete again. You have to learn. I keep going back to this issue of rationalization of processes and procedures. What has competition to do with that? Absolutely nothing. That's the biggest inhibitor in getting investment in a state. Learn from the states that have actually streamlined the process and procedure. No need to compete with them. Improving road infrastructure, improving logistics. What sort of competition you want to have with other states? You improve your own roads and why are we, at this point in time, there's no point in discussing competition. Why do you want to take investment from one state and take it to the other state? At the country level, it is a zero-sum game. Who gains? Instead of going to state A, it goes to state B. At a national level, it's the same investment. So what are we talking competition? I'm sorry to say that this is a wrong way of looking at taking India to 2047. Competitive federalism will not take us to 2047, the country that we desire. We need cooperative federalism for the country to go to 2047.
Now looking at that, that we need cooperative federalism, and you have also mentioned it in your slides as a key takeaway, that central agencies like Niti Aayog, which is a a central body that shall transform India. It's like a think tank, just for our German audience, to give a rough idea. They're well positioned to take this facilitating position in making or in further nourishing the cooperation, the learning from each other, which in parts is already working, as you have also pointed out.
No, I'm
it's
sorry.
not that it's not there.
No, I'm sorry. Niti Aayog is not playing the role which ought to play.
Right.
I mean, I'm
coming to that. So the regional exchange of best practices is to an extent already happening, but your point was, let's systemize it more, use the potential, have also Niti Aayog as a central agency play a role in it to fully leverage the potential. Now my question is looking, as you also mentioned, at the center-state relationship, which is to an extent a bit problematic for many reasons, some of you have mentioned. Wouldn't there be, from a state perspective, hesitation now that if someone from the center, from Delhi, basically, comes and tells us to learn from each other, wouldn't that be a very practical, operational hurdle in kind of making that best practice sharing difficult?
It is quite possible because I did it. And many officers have done it. It can be done. Niti Aayog is not a political organization. So if a bureaucrat of the CEO of Niti Aayog goes to a particular state, he's not yet treated as a politician. It's a sad state of affairs. So some of the institutions which should have been constitutional institutions have become political, but certainly not Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is a good institution. It can play that role. It should play that role. Many secretaries are themselves taking the initiative to go to the states, organize regional workshops so that states of that region learn from each other. This is something which needs to be institutionalized at the level of Niti Aayog. Partly Niti Aayog doing is in a different manner. They are actually, I'm told that they have a bouquet of good practices somewhere, but it has to be very aggressive in the sense they have to go to the state. You know, we can't keep sitting in Delhi and ask, you know, if all the states come to Delhi, how much time does each secretary have? About 10 minutes, 15 minutes to speak. You go to the state, and I felt it myself, you spend the entire day there with the team there. It has an amazing impact. People ask me, if you can pick up a single reason why coal happened in this country, the single reason was not holding a meeting in Delhi and going down to the states and interacting with the states. That is what Niti Aayog should do. Niti Aayog should not go out to the states and take a meeting. We are good at monitoring. You know, everyone wants to monitor. No. Niti Aayog should not be talking. They should allow other states to talk, other states to learn, act as a facilitator. Niti Aayog should become a principal facilitator in taking India to 2047. That's my view.
Thank you very much. I'm now bringing in the audience, and I already received some of the questions here. That's why I keep on looking at my phone. The first one that I'd like to read out, you can just give very brief responses so that we can tackle more questions. Also from Passau, so I encourage our listeners there, and also, of course, Professor Dr. Keil, who is our counterpart at the university. If you have any comment or question, please articulate that. So the first question I'm reading is, if the union government is taking the most of the steps without considering the will of the marginalized states, for example, Manipur and Tripura, why are we talking about the federalism at all?
I mean, the simple answer is they should be taken into account. You know, of the 8 things that I mentioned, political acceptability, social desirability, one very important ask was emotional relatability. What is emotional relatability? You have to take stakeholders into confidence if you want any idea to succeed. Because the action is going to be there in the field. If you haven't taken them into confidence, if you haven't discussed with them, the policy is bound to fail. So I totally agree with the questioner that if you don't talk to those people, if you don't take them into account, you can forget the implementation of policy in that state. All policies cannot be implemented by merely a danda. They have to understand the utility, the value of what is being told by the state, and policies will succeed, and only such policies have succeeded where you've taken stakeholders into confidence.
The next question concerns the political power dynamics between the center and states, or the politicalization of federalism, if you will. So there's an expansion of culture of freebies in state elections to gain political power in India, which makes a burden on fiscal federalism in India. One of the causes of center-state contention. Do you think it should be stopped by making an effective law by parliament?
See, again, laws won't solve the problem. I mean, Trump has demonstrated that laws have no meaning, and we did that long ago. I mean, whether international law or whatever law. So laws don't have meaning. How can you do it? And again, I address to all of you sitting here. Try and do some analysis as to the impact of these freebies on the mindset of people. There's no empirical evidence. We all guesswork. Someone should do a research that before election, these freebies were announced. Did it impact the thought process of the individual? And then we can have a discussion. Because my hunch is that they have become so common that actually they don't influence. But that's intuitive. I may be totally wrong. Some research has to go into whether setting up of a statue on which we spent 3,500 crores or giving a dole of 10,000 rupees just before election, whether it impacts. And then we can talk empirically. And then probably we can think in terms of a law, though I still feel that's not a solution. But let's go step by step. Let's not find a solution like saying it doesn't work, so come up with a law. No. Let's do some research. Let the Delhi University set up a research on this, the impact of freebies on the mindset of people before elections. No one, I have not come across the research. If you've come across, please tell me. This needs to be done.
Another question that again centers on the key topic today and on the economic development linked or correlating with federalism. So one student is asking, we are talking about competitive federalism and economic development in which states are using different strategies and innovation for their economic growth. But in this evolving federalism, states are also engaging internationally for their strategic investment, which is known as para-diplomacy. So is it not the para-diplomacy or subnational relations that end the classical notion of sovereignty and nation state, or is it decentralizing and democratizing?
I personally do not have anything against states engaging with international agencies. If it helps them, so be it. So long as it helps them. I mean, I don't think there is any erosion of sovereignty or anybody, because no state can engage internationally without the approval of the center. You can't directly negotiate an international agreement. So I'm not against it. I think it's very good if you can learn directly from somewhere. But I tell you, solutions to most of the problems in the country are within the country. You know, when I took over as Secretary of School Education, someone from across the Atlantic came here and we had those international Rai Saabs, very expensive ones. In summers, they used to come to India. In winters, they would go away and give their Rai and go back. And they said, Sir, you must visit England, Finland, Holland, Scotland, New Zealand, Switzerland, all the lands of the world. So I asked him, have you visited motherland? And I used to travel twice a week as Secretary of Government of India. And frankly speaking, I found most of the solutions to the problem for the country within the country. It is there. You have to go and see. So, I mean, if they're engaging with international organizations, I have no problem with that. Please do that. But as I said, solution to these problems don't appear in Davos. They're a nice place to visit. Switzerland is a lovely place to go. I've been there. So it's a nice place to go. Go there, but not in the name of development.
Just a very provocative thought again from my end. I hope you don't mind. So linked to that question, you're saying, of course, when it comes to international relations or partnerships at a state level, that's fair and fine. So supposing now some states, they learn from each other, they interact within India. And then one best or good practice turns out to be these investment summits that happen or have happened increasingly at a state level, like invest in Gujarat, invest in Maharashtra, etc., invest in UP. So that might be one learning that now all the states in their respective capacity apply. And then looking back to the international partners, when they look at India and then there are so many invest in state XYZ summits, isn't it then again competition?
No,
that those who have the better offers and the best infrastructure, airports, roads, and so on, attract the investment?
Yeah, okay, let me first suggest I'm talking to all of you, so I'm coming with a number of suggestions. Some of you should study how much actual investment happened after these summits. No empirical study has been done. Please do that. My hunch is most of them not even 10% fructify. That's my hunch. I hope I'm totally wrong. But do that study. Let there be empirical data as to whether actually it leading to that. Now, the external country, the other country will be thoroughly confused with these investment summits. But that's their problem. I'm not considered about their problem. I'm considering about my problems. Instead of wasting your time in telling somebody else how good you are in these investment summits, let the industry tell others how good that state is. देखिए हमारी तरफ यूपी में कहते हैं ना, हलवाई तो अपनी जलेबी को अच्छा बताता ही है, खाने वाले से पूछिए कैसी है जलेबी. तो हम advertisement, I am often wondered, why do states and central government come up with this advertisement, how good we are? अरे भाई जिसको पढ़ रही है उससे पूछिए ना. ये मेक इन इंडिया के लिए मैं कहता था. You know, having been part of industrial sector myself, you know, industry वाले आके रोते थे मेरे पास. और वहाँ शेर दहाड़ रहा है धड़ाधड़. You know, the point is, let us do what is actually required. If you want to show off, that's the order of the day, please do that. But that should not be given the primacy. The primacy has to be the ground reality, what is actually happening on the ground. So, let the industry speak on your behalf than speaking yourself in these summits.
So we have many more wonderful questions. I'll just take the final one now before we conclude the session, looking at the time, which is a contemporary one. If digital and technological enhancement and social media hyperactivism have impacted the nature of it, whether, the question is whether digital and technological enhancement and social media hyperactivism have impacted the nature of federalism in India. If yes, how?
Oh, it is for everyone to see. I don't have to say how. It is there for everyone to see everywhere. See, technology is transforming the entire landscape, whether it's artificial intelligence or otherwise. Now, all states need to wake up to this. I mean, we were having a very interesting discussion before we started here. And the lady who just left and gave the initial address looked very busy, and she must have been very busy. So I was politely telling her, if you can delegate, then you will not be as busy. All my colleagues as Secretaries Government of India used to leave office at 8:30, 9 p.m. I was there for 4 years. I left my office at 6 o'clock. If madam invites me again, I'll tell you how. That's what is needed. Use technology, and for heaven's sake, only do things which you have to do. Why should you do something which somebody else can do better than you? So I used to engage with a lot of universities who did my job. Let them do the job. They will feel happy. That's why I've given you so much homework today. I don't know how many of you are going to do it. Get into this. You will feel fulfilled. That will be a service to the nation. Competitive federalism or cooperative federalism or arriving at 2047, and you don't know whether we will be there or not. But you will feel fulfilled if you come to a very clear conclusion that after this summit, this much was announced, this much actually happened. You'll feel good about it, let me tell you that.
Yeah, I think that deserves applause. Thank you very much. And apologies that we could not take more questions. Maybe you get a chance to get some of them addressed afterwards. At this stage, please allow me to once again thank our partner, then the University of Delhi, represented by the head of the Political Science Department, Senior Professor Rekha Saxena, and her very hardworking and knowledgeable team. It's always a pleasure to work with you. Thank you also to University of Passau, who has really, complemented our ideation and thinking of designing something which spans across oceans and countries and further nurtures bilateral ties Indo-German cooperation. And with this start of a hybrid lecture series, I think we attempt to contribute with very interesting topics. As you can see, I think we could just endlessly talk about cooperative federalism and its implications and outlook on the future.
Thank you for cooperation. Cooperative.
Thank you. And we look forward also to the next edition, which will take place offline in Passau and will be broadcasted to India. All of the sessions will be also shared with participants or those who are interested in having a look at our keynote speeches, lectures, and discussions thereafter. So we try to create really a pool of knowledge on the topic of federalism, and that's the beauty of it, in the interdisciplinary niche of academicians and practitioners, because that is where the real, work and thinking and reflections happens. And in this sense, I'm very grateful for our keynote speaker, Mr. Swarupji, who has taken his time to spend the afternoon with us, share some of his personal experiences that are quite impressive, and his insights. And so with that, I'd like to end the session.